Welcome back to the Big Lad Podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by Chris Scott. How are you doing?
Very good, thanks. Yep. How you doing? You all right?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thank you. Would you like to give yourself a little introduction of who you are and what you do?
Right. Okay. Well, I'm Chris Scott. I was a discus thrower for many years. That was my primary sport. Went to the Commonwealth Games back in 2010. Came seventh there. Through the qualification distance for the Olympics in 2012, and then had a back injury. So discus then wasn't a priority in my life, and then I found indoor rowing a few years after that, and then that's been my sort of main sport, main focus in the last few years. And I won the European Indoor Rowing Champs 2020 and bronze at the World Indoor Rowing Champs 24 beginning of this year. So yeah, that's a brief summary.
Fair few different sports going on there. I think this is episode 51. I think this is the first episode I've had someone that's actually bigger than me on the Big Lad Podcast.
Well, that's Big Lad Podcast. I assumed everyone was big lads on there.
Well, I think we're going to have to call this episode the Bigger Lad Podcast.
Big lad.
So
first, you're 100 kilos.
Yeah, about 102 and 6'4". I think you're a bit bigger and a bit heavier.
I think I like to round up a little bit to 6'7" and about 120 kilos. So yeah, so 6'6" and a half, 6'7", 120 kilos.
There's a fair few kilos there as well. So firstly, how did you get into discus? Like, was that always a first option as a sport growing up, or were you sort of always a big lad and that was sort of a natural move into a sort of essentially like a power sport, essentially, isn't it?
So no, I wasn't always a big lad. I was unfit and used to play a lot of football, and I was the goalkeeper. That was kind of my position in the sort of social hierarchy. I was like the goalkeeper, while the cool lads were all playing football up front. And as a goalkeeper, I was just jumping around, springing around, and I was really explosive and could, obviously I was reasonably tall even at 13, 14 or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, I was mainly a goalkeeper, and then that translated into doing some high jump and stuff at school in school sports days.
Okay.
I was quite athletic and I could jump. I think I did like 183 in high jump when I was 14 or something. So I was okay at high jump, not particularly good. Then I went down the athletics track because my PE teacher at the time said, we're doing this at lunch breaks for half an hour. Why don't you go down the track and join a club, and you might get more out of it than what I can offer you in a lunch break. So I did. Went down the athletics track over in Guildford, and then it was actually hammer throwing that I started throwing wise first. Because I went down the track and just started doing every other event. You go down, you join a little group, and basically you're running all the time. And then come winter, it's cross country, and that was never me whatsoever. And then I saw these hammer throwers in the middle of the field, and I was like, I'd much rather be doing that. So
was there a sort of a reason behind that, or was it just a lack of enthusiasm for cross country?
Pretty much that. Lack of enthusiasm for cross country. It looked fun. The blokes doing it looked big and strong, and I thought, if I could choose what sort of person I wanted to look like, there probably was some aesthetic reasons even back then. Who do I want to look like? Big, strong hammer thrower, long distance runner. I thought, yeah, let's go for the hammer thrower.
Fair enough.
So yeah, I was throwing hammer for a few years, and then we'd throw hammer at the beginning of the session and then do some discus, and my discus distances just started getting better quite quickly. More suited physically to that because of my long arms. I've got an arm span of 6'10", I think about 6'10". Wow. So it's a bit taller than my height.
Yep.
And then I think I just enjoyed the success when things started to go well in discus throwing. I stuck with that more. So
it was kind of a case of you not picking the sport, but the sport picking you, kind of.
Yeah, probably was really. It was just I had my finger in lots of pies, and then when I started to get good at something, I was like, there you go, I want to do a bit more of that. I enjoy doing well at it.
Makes sense. If you're good at something, like double down.
I guess it's the same with like even the indoor rowing stuff. When I picked that up again, I did compete in a British Indoor Rowing Champs in 2005 as an under 18. I was doing bits and bobs of the rowing machine, but didn't take it seriously. But it was only back in a few years ago, 2018 again, when I jumped on again, and I'd had all the training for discus throwing, the strength stuff, and I jumped back on the machine and started doing some indoor rowing in a local gym, and thought, oh, that's all right for 100 metres. I enjoy that. I'm doing quite well at it. Let's go and compete in it. Let's try and get better at it. And yeah, it was sort of the success again that made me want to do more of it and keep seeing some success. So that's been the
So
drive.
So going back to like the discus side of things then, so what is that like to train? Like how do you go about training for discus? Is there a lot of weight training and strength training involved, or is it more technique and sort of mastering the craft of actually throwing a discus?
So it is a very technical sport, and you have to have a lot of focus on technique because you won't throw far unless you're efficient. You're applying force effectively, and your release velocity is high. You're not going to throw far unless those things happen. But if you look at the top throwers, they will all have strength numbers of a certain level to throw a certain distance. So there's no ignoring that you have to be strong. Like if you take an Olympic finalist discus thrower, they will be able to bench press between 180 and 200 kilos,
Wow.
power clean 160. They'll be explosive and powerful, basically. So that
Yeah, some
has to be part of
big
the training.
numbers then.
Yeah, so some of them are ridiculously strong. I mean, I was thinking about one guy in particular, a guy called Daniel Stahl. He won the Olympics back in 2000. When did he win? 2021, I think he did win. He's like power clean 200 kilos at 6'9". So he's a
Wow.
phenomenally powerful chap. That's the sort of strength levels you have to be. So you have to give a good portion of your training to strength training and power development training. And the specific strength for throwing is really important as well. So all sorts of weighted throwing implements and just general twisting trunk strength training. That took up a lot of my time in my sort of prime throwing years.
So on like a weekly basis then, how many times are we talking strength training? How many times are we talking actually throwing a discus? How would a normal week sort of be split out for you?
So bearing in mind, I was at my best back in 2011, 2010, 2011. So I'm referring back to these sorts of volumes to throw the furthest that I did back then. I was probably in the gym 4 times a week, throwing 4 or 5 times a week, specific strength sessions 3 or 4 times a week, maybe one aerobic session. And there was a portion of my life, about 2011, when I was lucky enough to be able to train full time. Had a little bit of funding from UK Athletics, and we all knew that London 2012 was around the corner, so I was just threw my life at trying to qualify for the Olympics, which unfortunately didn't happen. But that had the time to be able to train twice a day, effectively rest properly, eat properly. And long gone are those days, unfortunately. There's not any money involved in indoor rowing.
Yeah. Well, so while back in high school and college, I actually used to row, and I had GB trials twice as well. And I started, I think it was just before the Olympics in 2012. And as soon as the Olympics happened, there was so much money thrown at rowing because we did so well. And the amount of influx of people that we got down at our rowing club was crazy.
I can imagine, yeah.
And
Well, the legacy was there for a bit, wasn't it? For a bit.
yeah, and same with the cycling as well, I think. There was rowing and cycling for a good couple of year period, I think, and it just got money thrown at it. And then I don't think we started doing as well. We were still doing quite well, but not as well. So the funding got cut a little bit. But
I
that
feel
was
like
going to be one of the questions that I was going to ask was, were you working alongside all of this training, or did you have sponsors to sort of get you by? But was it just for that year where you were going to the Commonwealth Games, or was it?
So when I went to the Commonwealth Games, I was working as a teacher, well, a non-qualified teacher at a private school. So I was doing, I wasn't doing full days there. I was doing, I think, like 8 until 2, I think it was, which worked quite well for that portion of my life because, again, I was training before work and after work, and I still could train. I still do train twice a day now, but with much more rest and effectiveness in the training. So I was working even when I went to the Commonwealth Games. So I had to take the month off for the Commonwealth Games and the holding camp beforehand. But that was all agreed with the school I was working at, and I was very lucky to be supported. Certainly, I was selfish enough at that point in my career where if they had said, "No, sorry, you can't go," I obviously would have gone anyway. Like
Yeah,
that was
you can't turn that opportunity down.
Yeah, I wouldn't have. I would have just said, "I'm sorry, that's what I'm doing." if I haven't got a job when I get back, fine. But that's my priority in life at the moment. Which you have to be selfish and do stuff like that if you want to make it. But yeah.
So then, obviously, so you say that you were working, and then was it 2011 that you had enough funding that you could train full time leading up to
Yes.
the
So
Olympics?
based on my performances in 2010, because I broke the British Under-23 Championship record that year, and then got onto the bottom rung of UK athletics funding, and it wasn't huge amounts of money at all. It was literally the bottom rung, which was sort of a small quarterly payment that just about bought a little bit of food. And I was living at home with my parents at the time as well, so that was again one of the main
It
things
helps.
for saving. Yeah, and physio access and stuff like that. So I had a lot of people that were, and training venues supporting me as well. So I had a lot of people around that were helping me be able to train full time. And I remember those years, and in between, I think it was 2007 that they announced 2012. There was a real general sort of every man and his dog was announced as Olympic hopeful, and there was lots of little media articles about everyone in every sport, and everyone was trying their best to qualify. And some made it, some didn't. And for every person that made it, there's a person that didn't quite make it. So
Yeah. So just going to the Commonwealth Games before we get onto your injury before the Olympics, what was it actually like going to a Commonwealth Games? Like, describe the feelings of turning up and sort of representing the country and just the whole tournament in general.
yeah, I mean, there's so many different points of excitement. I mean, from first of all getting that first phone call saying you've been selected. I remember that moment specifically. That was great. I remember getting the kit and trying all that on for the first time. That's one of those moments where you're wearing it, looking in the mirror, being like, "All right, this is I'm enjoying this." Then there was the holding camp so I went in 2010, which was in Delhi, and the holding camp was in Qatar, in Doha and Qatar. So we were there for I think a week and a half, and then a couple of weeks in Delhi for the games. And I'd never been to those parts of the world, so it was all quite. I was trying to take it all in, and yeah, it was all quite. It wasn't overwhelming. I actually felt relaxed in the competition because I felt quite good about my throwing. I knew if I just did what I did every day, it would be okay. But then there's also that element of relief when you get a good throw out in qualifying to know that you made it to the next round. That was a big sense of euphoria. And then that moment of relief again when you do a first round throw in the final, and it's a throw that you'd be happy with if the competition finished like that, and you've got more throws. That's like right, I can enjoy this now. I can listen to the crowd because there was there was an Indian chap in the final, and obviously it's in India, and so there was a big focus on him as one of the favourites. So it was actually quite sort of like 40,000 people watching the discus. It was quite an exciting environment to be in. Yeah.
I can imagine as well, because obviously you do all those sort of dark night training sessions in the cold when there's nobody around, and then you're doing that, what you love doing, in front of 40,000 people, especially, like you say, there was a guy from India in the final, so I imagine there was a lot of hype around just that event in general with those circumstances.
There was, yeah, and there's almost a moment of once you finish competing, you're like, oh, that's it, it's done now. Because it was in October, it was late in the year for whatever reason. I think we got the notified that we'd qualified in June or something. So you got a couple of months to prepare, get ready, psychologically get ready, and then everything in your life is gearing towards that. And then you compete, and it's like, oh, that's done now. Right, what's next?
Yeah, so you hear quite a lot of people, especially like now the Olympics have just finished, that people really struggle with the come down after the Olympics and sort of not
Yeah,
really knowing what to do because there's not really something to quite train for. Like, you've obviously dedicated 4 years of your life to really training for this one sort of month of your life. Did you
yeah.
have that feeling afterwards, like a bad come down after it, or did you struggle at all?
Not so much after the Commonwealth Games because I thought, right, I've done so I threw 57.5 meters there, and my PB at the time was like 59.90 or something. So I hadn't quite broken that 60-meter mark, and I didn't do that until the next year. But I sort of felt like my progression was kept going up, and I was looking forward to basically trying to qualify for the Olympics the next year. So I still had that trajectory of trying to qualify for the Olympics, which was the main goal. Whereas the Olympics for a lot of other people is the main goal, and they get there. But I think for me, I probably experienced something similar after I had my back injury, where I then stopped throwing because I couldn't throw, and I sort of had that loss of identity. I was like, oh well, I'm not Chris the discus thrower because I can't, and my career might be over because I've just had major back surgery. So I sort of had that loss of identity a little bit, I think.
So
And
what exactly happened with your back injury then? Like how, obviously it was quite serious with you needing surgery. What was it that caused it?
So I had a disc herniation at L5S1, right at the bottom, lower spine, right at the bottom of the lumbar spine. And there was little episodes of pain every now and then that each time got worse and worse. And the recovery from each one was longer, and it was just progressively getting worse and being triggered by easy things. So to start with, the first time I did it was deadlifting, and my techniques were never bad or anything. I think I've always had good movements in my power lifts. Something just went ping, and I was sort of laid flat on my back, and 3 or 4 days later, absolutely fine. But each of these episodes, as I called them, was the disc herniating a little bit more, getting a little bit worse. The fluid leaking out from the disc, and it got so bad that basically in 2012 we were in America in the Olympic Training Center in San Diego, and I was offloading a bench press, spotting Lawrence Okoye on the bench press. I don't know if you know Lawrence Okoye.
Recognise the name.
It was 220 kilos, and he was doing a couple of reps at 220. And
a couple of reps, not even a one rep.
Without really thinking about it, I just sort of jolted it up and helped lift it off, and forgetting it was 220 kilos, and my back twinged out there, and I immediately had that moment of fear of like, oh god, I've gone and done it now. Like, and it from that point, I sort of knew that I wasn't going to qualify for the Olympics. It was like the worst back pain I'd had. Rested up for a few days, flew home, had an epidural, some more injections, met a couple of surgeons, put off the surgery for a bit, but I did have the surgery eventually. Actually had the surgery in 2013. I had a disc replacement surgery, which isn't. It might be available in the NHS now, but back then in 2013, it was quite new. And it's a type of surgery that nowadays, if you've got a back problem, they'll fuse you together. If you go to the NHS, they'll say, wait 6 months and then we might fuse it, or hoping you get better. But this one, they pull the disc out, scrape out all the discal material, and put in a prosthetic disc, so that between the two vertebrae, you've still got like rotation movement.
Yeah.
So the idea was that by having that version, I'd still be able to get to end range rotationally for throwing purposes and potentially make a comeback. It's never been as strong rotationally than it was beforehand. But I've been able to get back to a good level of sport and training, and I still did throw sort of recreationally for a few years afterwards, up until last year, really.
Right. So you were only about 23 at this time, weren't you?
Yes. So 25 I was 25 in 2013 when I had it. Yeah. So major back surgery at 25 is.
Wow. But it started sort of 2 years prior to that, and it was a few years worth of issues, essentially.
Yeah, it was maybe even more than that, maybe 4 or 5 years. Not the first injury. Yeah, it was probably like 20. It definitely happened once at university, so I must have actually been about 20. Yeah.
Wow. And it wasn't necessarily the discus throwing that was causing the issues. It was actually the weightlifting for the discus throwing.
Yeah, I think most of the episodes were in the weight room, and each time you sort of build back up, do your rehab, build up your core strength and stuff, and something catches you off guard, or not even necessarily with any reason. Maybe the volume over time catches up with you, and then ping back to square one. Yeah, and I think the reason why in 2012 it got much worse as well was because I was feeling like I had to qualify for the Olympics. I needed to be strong to throw far.
Yeah.
Just all got too much for my body. So yeah.
And you say you didn't necessarily have the feeling after the Commonwealth Games, but you had that sort of feeling knowing that you weren't going to qualify for the Olympics, especially with it being in London. How did
Yeah.
that affect you? Obviously, you say that you had to stop sort of throwing discus at that level. What was the thoughts that were going through your head at that time?
I did struggle a bit. I struggled, as I say, like with the identity of for the years before, let's say since they announced the Olympics in 2007 for 2012, I was like, I'm an athlete. I'm trying to qualify for the Olympics. This is what I do. And then, because I knew I wasn't going, it was a bit like, oh, what am I doing? Like, I still went to the gym. I still worked out, but I wasn't training. I was working out. And I just thought, yeah, I did struggle with it a bit. But in my head, I was trying to make a comeback. I was like, right, I'll stay in shape. I'll see how long it takes for this disc to repair. But I did start doing some throwing again in 2016, only when my training partner at the time, Jade, qualified for Rio. So she went to Rio, and I just went down to train and throw with her and be part of the training group that she was in, and was able to do a bit, but it was just never going to be as good as my prior
So,
days in.
even though you had the surgery, there wasn't really a chance of you getting to Rio either.
No, I was by that point having not thrown for probably 3 years, because I just didn't feel like I had the strength rotationally. I'd kind of given up on the idea of being an Olympian after that, and yeah, so it was definitely did struggle a bit with that loss of identity. I guess I just thought, I've got to go and get a job and try and earn a living and do what everyone else does.
Yeah. So, did you go back to teaching then after that, or did you step into something completely different?
No, so late 2013, I did a few small jobs here and there. Late 2013, I started at the company that I work for now, which is a commercial lighting manufacturer, just totally by
Okay.
chance. I was just working in production for a while, and then gradually doing some admin work, and then I took over as managing director of the company beginning of this year. So that does take a lot.
Congratulations.
Oh, thanks. That does take a lot of my focus now. So now the struggle is focusing on the needs of a business and making sure we're bringing enough money to employ a few people,
Yeah.
and trying to train and trying to compete, and juggling different things to when I was back then.
I know the feeling. Because I work a day job myself. I've got my online PT on the side, I've got the podcast, and I'm also
Yeah.
trying to do like a little bit of a small clothing brand on the side. So I've got juggling a
Okay.
lot of plates myself. So I know the pains, to say the least. But
Yeah. Let me know about the clothing brand and stuff. I'd be intrigued to see what you got there, see what it is.
I will do. I'll show you it after this.
Yes.
But just going back to the sort of Commonwealth Games side of things, then, is it true what they say about the athlete villages? Is it like crazy parties once events are finished? Like, did you
I've,
experience any of that?
I mean, I didn't partake in any of those activities, but I've heard that these things do happen. Yeah. Do you know what? People love sprinters. That's what I've noticed it being, because I also went to things like European Juniors and
Right.
like Winter Throws Cup competitions in Eastern Europe, and there wasn't sprinters there actually, but yeah, the female athletes seem. I take that's what you're referring to.
No, just in general, you hear about like once certain events are finished, then everyone sort of it's big parties all night and all the
I
rest
thought
of it.
you were going to refer to the whole sort of Olympic. There's not a myth really that they give out a load of
Oh
condoms.
yeah, the boxes of condoms and stuff. Yeah, I've heard about that too.
I think people do get a bit off leash after they've competed, because they don't have to be in prime shape for another. They've got a whole winter before they're going to start competing again. So yeah, people let themselves loose, and that's the one time of the year they do get to enjoy themselves around like-minded people as well. So it's always a good
Yeah, you
party.
can understand, obviously, like if you've been training, like solely focused on, like some people, like that 1 month of your life for 4 years, then I guess that release is kind of needed at some point.
Yeah, definitely, because I'm sure there've been so many social occasions that athletes have said no to in the lead up to Olympics, that why would you say no
Yeah.
when you're past the part? Once you've competed, you can relax, and it does become a bit of a holiday, if you like. That sounds like it shouldn't be like that with a public funded sort of event, but you can relax and enjoy a bit after
Yeah,
competing.
you've got to enjoy yourself at some point. Like, I know myself, back when I used to row, like in high school and college, I missed a hell of a lot of 18th birthday parties because I was in a tent somewhere ready to race the next day, like in Nottingham or something. So yeah, I can only imagine the sort of things that people have to turn down to then focus on, like you say, sprinters for potentially 10 seconds of their life.
So you had your GB trials a couple of times. What stops you going further down that route? You don't run
So
on the water more, do you?
no, so I started rowing quite late. So I was 15, just before my 16th birthday it was. So I started within like the first week, we did a 2K test and I beat everyone that was my age group, but I didn't have a clue whether it was a decent time or not. And like I was getting told, oh, like, are you on steroids or something like that? I was like, what? I was like, I've just turned up. I don't even know if it was a good like time. And then literally my coach turned around to me after about a month or so and said, if you want to go for GB trials, they're in October or November. Do you want to go? And I was like, I've literally started a month ago. So I have no idea. So yeah, I went first round of trials within 6 months with not a lot of experience in a single on the water. I was more sort of doubles and quads.
Right.
So when it came to on the water test, I not necessarily struggled. It was just you could tell the people that had been rowing since they were kids, the technique was a lot better. And you can have really bad technique on a row machine, but produce a really good time. You cannot do the same on the water. So
And they talk about the feel,
just
don't they? The sort of being able to feel the water and
it's
the
completely different. So for me, transferring that across the water, I was just there was too big of a skill gap essentially between people that have been doing it since they were kids. And
yeah.
then I went again the next year, improved slightly, but I think it was just because of how late I started. It was a lot to sort of bridge the gap. Imagine, say for instance, discus throwing. If you've started and there's been someone doing it for 10 years, that's a hell of a lot of experience and training that you've got to catch up on to potentially throw the same distance.
There's probably a bit of a comparison there in the feel of a discus throw. Like getting the acceleration path smooth is probably like getting the curve and the stroke curve getting as smooth as possible. Yeah, it's similar
Exactly.
things you have to do efficiently. Otherwise, you're never going. You can be as strong as you like.
Yeah,
You can have the biggest engine in rowing terms on the erg, but you've definitely got to have that feel for the boat.
exactly. I see it in the gym all the time. Like there's lads that are doing these Hyrox classes now and they're pulling decent times on the machine, but you look at the way they're doing it, and I would just think if you were doing that on the water, you would be capsized within about 2 seconds. Um,
Yeah, it's interesting the whole Hyrox thing, isn't it? Because a few people have sort of come up to me and said, "Oh, I'm working towards a Hyrox. Have you got any tips on the rowing machine?" And normally the first thing I say is, don't try and do a 1K time trial. Basically, use the rowing to conserve energy because it's a running event.
yeah,
Be
yeah.
efficient.
Use as much upper
Don't try-
body as you can, basically.
well, yeah. I mean, if you're only on the rowing machine for, let's say, people are going to do it in 3:30ish, because if the amount of extra energy used to do 3 minutes rather than 3:30 will blow out your
Hmm.
rest of your day. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's an interesting event in itself, Hyrox. But that's why a
yeah. I
lot of
did
people have
one
rowing
back in
machines these days.
March.
Oh, you're a Hyrox veteran, are you?
No, no. So me and my mate decided to sign up for one, and we gave ourselves about 8 weeks to train. And of that, I went to New York on holiday for a week, and I also got food poisoning about 2 weeks before, which wrote me off for a
Right.
whole week. And then we just had a really silly experience going to Madrid. We got like the first flight out on a Friday morning. We had about 3 hours sleep before the flight. Got to Madrid, got bored and just went for a wander. Ended up doing like 22,000 steps. Had a crap night's sleep in the hotel, and then first thing we were up for Hyrox the next day. It was just we didn't do enough training. Like it wasn't great. We still did a decent time. It was like a 1:15, but yeah, it could have been so much better just purely from just setting up right, basically.
So interesting. I'm interested as to what sort of pace you went out on the row then compared to what you were capable of over a 1K.
um, a lot slower than the running. It's not even necessarily the running. The sled push and the sled pull kill you off very early on, and your legs just feel like lead. The rowing is quite far back, if I remember rightly. I think obviously you've got to take into account we were doing 500 meters each, so I did 500 meters, hopped off, and my mate got on. So that obviously takes into account the time. I think we did it in probably roughly about 3:30.
Yeah,
we were pulling about a 140, 145 split. So
sounds about right.
yeah,
Why would you try and push too much harder and then like debilitate yourself for the next thing?
yeah, it wasn't nice. It really wasn't. We
Interesting,
stupidly only trained together once as well.
So you probably have to literally change your technique to take the weight out of your legs and use more upper body because it's a high
Yeah,
rocks.
yeah, definitely. It is a lot, to say the least. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see if you did one as well, repping the heavy fellas.
8K of running, is it? No thanks.
Yeah, it was. Well, the funny thing is, I was looking round when I was there, and I was like, nobody else here looks like me.
Yeah.
Like, I've got reasonably big legs. There was like fellas with big-ish upper bodies, but then they had skinnier runners' legs. I was looking around, and I was like, yeah, I'm a little bit out of my comfort zone here.
I've heard that you're not allowed to wear a t-shirt when you do Hyrox as well. Is that true?
Oh, it does my head in. Honestly, it is. I go to like a Hyrox affiliated gym now as well,
Right.
and they do all the classes in about 5 minutes, and they've all got the tops off. I'm like, I'm a big guy. I sweat a lot. I've never once taken my top off in the gym.
No, that's not my style either.
No, I don't get it. I really don't. But yeah, apparently you can't train with your top on doing a Hyrox.
Interesting to see. I've just got a feeling based on this is completely side subject. I think a lot of CrossFit gyms are going to start leaning towards Hyrox more in the next couple of years, based on everything that's going on in CrossFit at the moment. It'd be interesting to see whether that does happen. But I think CrossFit Hyrox is really on the up at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. Like I did it at the start of the year where I feel like it was on the rise. Now it's literally every man and his dog's doing a Hyrox.
Yeah, it seems strange as well that everyone's competing in a Hyrox in a different country. So everyone's flying one, like people crossing over, going from London to Madrid or whatever. And if everyone stopped and thought, right, let's do it in my own country, it would have worked. But everyone's going abroad to do it.
Yeah, so like we did ours in Madrid, and the main reason for that is the same weekend there was one up in Scotland. I think it was Glasgow or Edinburgh or something. And I just said to my mate, I was like, look, do we go to like Glasgow and it's raining, or do we go to Madrid and get some sun?
Sounds like you got to see some of the city with your 22,000 steps as well, so that's a good thing.
Yeah. The only thing is the weather wasn't much better than it was here. So yeah, we had like a really average week of weather, but it was better than going to Scotland anyway.
Yeah, I think for things like that as well, like the World Indoor Rowing Championships in Prague, it is an excuse to go and see another city and enjoy some culture.
Yeah, if you can.
Yeah.
If you can, why not?
Oh, exactly, yeah. So if I do go away now to compete in something like, World Indoor Rowing Champs, I'll make sure I book my flight a good few days back afterwards so you get some time to explore.
Yeah, it's got to be done. But just going back to the sort of the GB athletics side of things, I saw that you weren't too happy with GB athletics on your social media. You were sharing some posts leading up to this year's Olympics. Do you want to explain more about what was going on?
Right. Okay. Yes. There's a few separate issues that are combined into one. The resultant effect that British athletics have absolutely lost the plot and just aren't fit to govern athletics in the UK. The reason why I first started sort of having a bit of a voice about this was because of the facility strategy that they brought out a facility strategy document 3 or 4 years ago, and they claim that their aim is to improve the quality of facilities across the country. And perhaps COVID has had a bit of an effect on it, but essentially a significant proportion of facilities, especially in throwing terms like throwing cages, ended up being condemned by companies that were also the salespeople to sell the new equipment. That's who British Athletics brought on to try and test equipment to see if it was up to scratch. So they come and look at cages. So a throwing cage, they come and look at it and they say, "Oh no, this is a bit out of date. There's a couple of holes in the net. Sorry, we're going to have to condemn it. By the way, we sell the new cages at a cost of 30 grand. You're going to have to buy one if you want to still use it. If your track still wants to get a license to host a competition, you now need a new cage and we're going to sell it to you." There was an absolute racket about that. That was the bit that first got me sort of a bit frustrated about athletics, because even when I was still trying to do some throwing a couple of years ago, literally all the tracks around this area were closed, or the cages had been pulled down. I just had nowhere to train. So I was like jumping over fences and throwing on old bits of concrete at 5 o'clock in the morning to get some throws done. I just thought, what's the point in doing this anymore? That's sort of part A to it. That was one of my biggest gripes at the time. But then recently, the selections for both the European champs and the Olympics, they've reduced the teams to such a small size, and people that did obtain qualifying distances and were invited to the Olympics via the World Athletics ranking system. So this year, the Olympic qualification system was the official sort of A standard distance was raised a lot higher, so that in the throws, for example, you're supposed to only get 12 people, around about 12 people that qualify through the official distance, and then about another 20 that qualify through the ranking system. And it incentivises people to go around the world and compete in high standard competitions to get a ranking to qualify. British Athletics turned around and said, "We're not going to take anyone who hasn't thrown that A standard distance. So even if you qualified through the ranking system, we're just not going to take you." So there was, and it mainly affected throwers, because the standards were higher in the throws than they were in the sprints and the long distance stuff. So there were multiple hammer throwers and discus throwers, like my old training partner Jade as well, who qualified. World Athletics sent the invitation to British Athletics, and British Athletics declined the invitation to the Olympics on behalf of the athlete and said, we're not going to accept this invitation on your behalf. We're declining it. You can't go to the Olympics. And
what was the reason behind that?
Just their strategy. They think that unless you're capable of a medal at that particular games, they don't want someone at the Olympics who might come 12th, or reasonably. They could even come. Everyone has a good days, bad days. They could make a final. They could do well, but it was basically you have a British Athletics saying, if we don't think you're going to win a medal, we're not going to select you, even though you've been officially invited to the Olympics by World Athletics. And so there were so many
absolutely crazy.
It's absolutely awful, because again, it could be sort of suggested it's a restriction of trade for people who have been invited by the official qualification system and then declined by their own governing body, so they can't compete in the Olympics. So there's a big fallout on that. People not competing. One particular hammer thrower went out and threw the weekend after the Olympics a distance that would have put him like 6th in the Olympics.
So they've basically denied that athlete from having that experience and being able to essentially say they came 6th in the world that year, which, it might not be a medal, but that is some achievement in itself.
And it's not even about the denial of that athlete. It's about, let's say, when that athlete has got his GB kit on and he's at his local school and he's inspiring all the kids saying, I'm a hammer thrower, I went to the Olympics. Little kids will look at him and be like, wow, isn't that cool? I want to be like that kid. I want to be like him.
Exactly.
The legacy of that is just gone.
It's inspiring the next generation to keep the sport going in the country. If they've not got people turning up to the Olympics because they don't think they'll win a medal, then what's the point in funding them all in the first place?
Well, they've got some sort of crystal ball where they can predict whether someone's going to have a good day or a bad day. It doesn't make any sense. So
you only have to look at the girl who was doing the pole vault, who was like nailed on for gold, and she didn't even make through the first round, I don't think.
Oh yeah, so the British girl Molly, she thing is, no one would say she shouldn't have been there. Like I would.
No, but what I'm saying is like you said, that people can have good days, people can have bad days. I think she was the world leader, if I'm not wrong, this year. near enough nailed on for a medal and didn't even make through the first round. So
Yeah.
it is possible these things can happen. Just like someone might have a bad day. Someone who was potentially going to come sixth on paper may have thrown a crazy throw for whatever reason and came third.
Exactly,
Or
doesn't it? Like last round of the long jump, you get some huge outlier jump, and it's all, these outlier performances do happen, and they do happen at championships because of the environment. But these people never get to experience it. So
it only takes one person to sort of hit the net as well, and that knocks people's confidence for the next throw. And then you're constantly thinking, "Don't hit the net, don't hit the net," and guess what happens? You hit the net.
So British athletics are not flavour of the month for any athletes, really. There's lots of outspoken athletes, more than ever have been before, and it's so. On top of that, the commercial side of British athletics, the ones that put on the London Anniversary Games, they've made huge losses in the last couple of years because they haven't been able to attract title sponsors, and it's just the people involved have done a terrible job at promoting athletics in the UK. We built Birmingham Alexander Stadium for the Commonwealth Games in 2022, and the British Athletics Championships aren't even held there. It was announced they were going to be held there, and then it got changed like earlier on in the year to be held in the Manchester Regional Arena, which is the warm-up track for the Etihad Stadium, basically like a small stadium next to the Etihad Stadium.
Yeah,
and the seating is basically 5 rows deep, so no one was going to watch it. It wasn't on BBC, so previous years it's always been on BBC. British Athletics tried to play hardball and command a big payment for it, and they said no, and they put it on iPlayer, I think, in the end. So yeah, British Athletics has not had any coverage. Sponsors have just run away from them. They've lost huge amounts of money. The athletes hate them. It's not looking good.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound like it. It seems like it needs a bit of an overhaul, to say the least, to sort a few issues out. That main one for me, though, is declining people from going to the Olympic Games when they've earned the right to be there.
Yeah, that is the main thing. That and the facilities combined for me was just a real, just angers me that there's so many young athletes now that first of all aren't able to participate because they've got no facilities, and then if they wanted to participate because they've seen someone on telly who they think, oh, that's great, I want to go and run, jump, throw, they're not on telly in the first place, and they've got nowhere to train and compete. So it's lose all round.
Yeah, it seems there's a lot of things that need to change, to say the least. So just moving now from the discus into the rowing, or as you call it, power tugging.
Power tugging, yeah. My little phrase really for it. It's my style of rowing, I suppose.
It definitely is, from the numbers that you pull, and some of them are insane. So I had a quick look through your Instagram. You've done a 2K at rate 12 and still pulled a 6:58. I can't even comprehend going that slow.
That was I can't remember how that challenge. I think me and David Rackstraw were trying to see who could do a sub 7 at the lowest rate, and I think I did it like 16. He did it at 15. I did it 14. He did it at 13. Whatever. And then managed to do it at 12 in the end. And,
that's absolutely insane.
It's one of those things that no one in their right mind would ever bother to try that. So I don't think anyone's done that before. And because the water rowers don't have their lean towards the aerobic side much more than they do the strength side, I like to think it's a performance that hasn't been done before.
I can't imagine anyone doing a faster 2K at rate 12, to be honest. Or, like you say, even bother trying. So, as far as I'm concerned, it's a potential world record.
Maybe it was one of the performances I think I'm most proud of as well is my 1K rate 18. I just snuck sub 3 in that, so 2:59.9 at rate 18. That's one that I was, at the time, I remember thinking I was probably in my best shape rowing wise. I just snuck under the number. I was like, I felt good about that performance at the time. It's so pointless.
It is, yeah, it's pointless, but it's also impressive. Like, for a lot of people probably listening won't understand how impressive that is, but for like your average person, if you can get a sub 7 minutes on a 2K, you're in pretty good nick. Like, obviously, more impressive if you're like a well-trained rower is like 6:30 and below, but that's a different kettle of fish. For your average person in the gym, if you can hit a sub 7, you're in a good position doing it. So for anyone listening that doesn't understand it, rate 12 is 12 strokes per minute. So you're essentially doing 1 stroke every 5 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
You'd probably more looking around like 30 to 34 strokes a minute if you were looking to do like a decent 2K time. So the amount of power that Chris put down is ridiculous.
And it ceases to be rowing because of the amount you have to lean back to do, to get the maximum out of each stroke. If you watch me do it, you think, well, that's just not indoor rowing.
I can only imagine. I can genuinely only imagine.
But it's a fun challenge anyway.
So like you said, like when you were a kid, I think you were about 17, 18, you did some indoor rowing. What was it that got you back into it? Was it the fact that you could no longer do the discus and you just, like you mentioned earlier, that you just got on a rowing machine in the gym and started pulling some decent numbers? Was it that sparked it again?
Yeah, so back in 2005, I did what was the BIRC at the time, British Indoor Rowing Champs, before it became the British Rowing Indoor Champs. So it was Burke rather than Brick. Yeah. And I did a 2K there as a junior 18, and I did 6:45 or something, with pretty terrible technique. That, in fact, it was Mo Speehy that won that race that day with like 6:0 something as a 17-year-old, and he obviously went on to have a pretty good career.
Yeah, not too bad.
I think I came like 20th or something. But that was, I was just training in the local gym, just playing around on the rowing machine, and curiosity got the better of me, and I thought, what's a good 2K time? I Googled it, thought, right, okay, I'm going to enter a competition. I don't know, I just always had that competitive side. So that was me back when I was 17 doing a 2K. And I don't think there was 500 metres or anything back then. And I wasn't that strong or heavy or anything back then. Then I was at a gym called Athlete Movement, and they had a monthly gym challenge, and one of them was 100 metres. And I had a couple of goes at that just to try and win the monthly challenge, whatever it was. And I think I did 13.3 something for 100 then.
Jeez.
So yeah, I remember seeing the split go down to like 103, 104 or something. That was the 100-metre challenge at the time. And then I think I put that on Instagram, and John Goodall messaged me, or someone tagged John Goodall and said, look at this guy doing 100 metres. And then John Goodall messaged me saying, why don't you come and compete at the Welsh Indoor Rowing Champs? Because there's 100 metres this year.
Oh, right.
So,
and when was this?
This was maybe 2018, I think it was.
Okay.
So the Welsh Indoors had they had a 100 with the race system as well, which is pretty unusual. And so I went all the way to Cardiff that year just to do a 100-metre race. Bearing in mind, half of that is the reaction to the start anyway.
Yeah.
So I did 13.8 in the race, which I'm told is a world record 100 metres in the race system.
Wow. That's crazy.
Time the start right on that one.
Yeah, I've not seen any other races actually do 100 metres. That's pretty interesting.
There's a video of the race and some of the techniques in that, and people flailing around. It's quite funny to watch. It just doesn't look like rowing at all. It looks like a room of people just frantically, gyrating.
What rate were you going off in that one? I assume a bit faster than 12 strokes a minute.
Do you know what? It was still only about low 40s. I've
really?
Never, even for a 100, I'm just not a fast rater. I'm stroke length and power. I feel like the faster I'm rating, the more time I'm spent not pulling, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
For me, stroke length has always been a huge part of my technique, so I think I row quite differently to a lot of other rowers. So even my 2K PB I did at rate 24 as well. I went back and did a 2K at the Welsh Champs the year after, maybe it's a couple of years later. And did my PB at rate 24, because I just don't feel I can rate effectively higher than that for that sort of distance.
And what time was that?
That was 6:13 at 24.
That's ridiculous. I think my PB when I was 17 was a 6:40, and that was, to be fair, I was never that high on the rate for that. I think I was around 26 for that, maybe a little bit higher towards like the back, sort of 500 maybe. But I was always told to go faster, but I just didn't feel like, I feel like I gas out quicker from going at a higher rate.
That's exactly how I feel. I feel like my heart rate spirals out of control as soon as I go over 24. Like I mean, for a 500, obviously go faster, but for a 2K distance, I don't think I've ever completed one when I've tried to go faster than rate 24.
Well, the thing is as well with the GB trials, that was a rate 24 as well. So
Okay.
I always like sticking around that sort of stroke rate just so I was familiar with when it came around to GB trials. But how did the power tugging start then, like the lower rate stuff? What sparked that? Because
so I guess the 500 meters was the target, and I spent ages working on what sort of rate I thought I was most effective at, and so I did that by at a whiteboard in my old garage, and I had the top columns were 1 minute and 500 meters, and had every rate from like 20 up to 36, I think. And I know my technique starts to break down at about 36. Like I start to shorten the slide because I haven't got enough time to give a full leg drive. Yeah. So I've got PBs written down somewhere of every single, I say every rate, like rate 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, at both the minute and 500 meters. And because I was working from home for a bit during COVID, and I had like a really short amount of time in the lunch break to go and get some sort of session done. So I'd look at the whiteboard and I go, that one, I'm going to do 500 rate 24 today. And 5 minutes warm up, boom, get that done. 5 minutes lying on the floor, and then go back to work. And you can have the whole session done and feel like you've achieved something. And you can do that regularly as well, because they're, especially the lower rates, they're slightly less taxing than full 500 meters, which, full 500 at race pace will take me a week to recover.
Yeah.
That debilitating.
It is a lot, isn't it? The mad thing is with the 500, it's not that far. It's not a sprint, but it's also not even close to long distance. It is, I would say, worse than doing a 2K.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Definitely worse than doing a 2K.
It is absolutely insane. Like, so we actually were sat next to each other at the Indoor Rowing Championships in December. There was an empty machine, and then you, and then Phil. So the funny thing about that, actually, I sat down thinking it was just a load of other random blokes that sort of do a bit of rowing every now and again, and then there was like a special announcement for yourself being the European champion and Phil being the world record holder. I sat down and just went, shit. Front row with everyone in front of us. I was like,
What did you pull that day again? You went one.
I pulled a 125, which I was reasonably happy with, considering I'd pulled my calf and I'd been ill all week. I was hoping to pull closer to like a 120, but I got to about 300 meters in and just died. Like, literally, fatigue just hit. Yeah.
If you're pulling a fast 500 meters, you will die at 300 meters. There's just no escaping it. That's why I think past that point, there's a point about 250, 300 meters where you go, God, I'm in for it now, aren't I? This is going to hurt. And you either commit at that point or you fall off, fall off the wagon. It's not going to happen. And when you're in a race, you have no other choice but to hit that point. I think that's the biggest thing in the 500 meters is the anxiety of knowing you're going to reach that point at about 300 meters and have no choice but to just grit your teeth.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I found as well with the machines at the event, I found they were a lot harder to pull. Like the drag factor was way higher than I was training on. and I felt that had a little bit to do with it, more in my forearms more than anything. But yeah, I went in with no plan whatsoever. I went off at 52 strokes a minute to begin with. Like I had a little camera set up to record it, and I went off like a house on fire, and then, like I say, died for the last 200 meters.
Yeah, I think I saw the video of you rowing. It's so you're going to compete again this year? Did you say you are or you aren't?
I think so. Yeah, I think I'm gonna. I just need to actually put a bit more training into it. But yeah, I need to go in with an actual plan this time instead of just letting the adrenaline get to me and just go all guns blazing. Because the worst thing is, you see on the screen how far behind you are the next person and how close the person behind you is. About half, like I went into it just wanting a top 10 finish because I hadn't rowed for God knows how many years and barely trained. So I was like, if I can go top 10, I'll be happy to leave with that. About halfway through, I think I was about fourth or fifth. And then the last 200, it just went one position at a time. And I clung on and got 10th.
I hate that part of, because it's such an individual event when you're just looking at the screen, isn't it? In a race, I hate that part that shows either you're losing ground on someone or someone's gaining ground on you or whatever. I try and completely not look at that. I just pretty much close my eyes, look at the meters counting down, try and focus on keeping my stroke length rather than tying up and just flailing around, and hope it ends quickly.
See, it's interesting that you say that because I saw Phil Clapp. For anyone that doesn't know, he's the world record holder for the 500 meter sprint. He's actually recently broke his own record. He brought out a sort of guide for how to do sprint rowing. So I thought, I'll give it a go. See what he says. Obviously, he's not a bad person to go from, the world record holder. And he actually says about shortening up his leg drive to be in the strongest portion of the stroke for as long as possible, whereas you're more on about lengthening your stroke as much as possible. So there's two conflicting styles there, isn't there?
It completely depends where your priorities are. So, my strength in the rowing machine is the leg power and the leg drive, which is why I drive for a long period of time and lean back further than everyone else. Like, my lean back in a race is just much further. Yeah. Some people are so much more hip and back dominant that they can shorten the slide and use more hip and backs, and it makes sense for them. And there'll be people in the middle as well that have a sort of combination of the technique, and the people that are hip and back dominant, I think, can rate a lot higher as well, because only their upper body needs to hinge more, and they've got less coming from the legs. Whereas I need to use the length of the slide to apply force for a longer period of time, and basically hang off the handle longer. That's sort of my technique.
Yeah. I've seen some of your videos and you do literally, like, if I was to see someone doing it in the gym, I'd be sat there going, oh, they're going to be in hospital or something with a dodgy back. But if you can do it properly.
5 seconds, yeah. What's he doing? A 2K rate 12? What an idiot.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. But I think one of the issues I've got with me competing in that is obviously I'm competing against the likes of yourself and Phil, who are, like, obviously I'm a tall guy, I'm 6'4", but then there's you at 6'7", and I think Phil's about 6'9", and you've both got about probably 10, 20 kilos on me, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a hell of a lot then when you convert that into power. Because, so I did a few calculations before, so the power is actually exponential, isn't it, as you are trying to go for a lower split. So like a 130 would be 480 watts, but a 120 is 684, but then a 110 is 1020. So the gap between literally 10-second increments is going up more and more each time. So to get to those, like the likes of Phil doing, I think what was it, 108 that he got recently?
Was it
something crazy like that? But
109 flat or something, 108.6.
Yeah. It is, like, for me to try and get to those levels it's not like an excuse. I also play football. That's one of my main issues, is trying to do my leg training around football. It's always been an issue for me. So for the likes of yourself, I saw on your Instagram the other day you were squatting 203 for 3 reps. I've never had 203 on my back in my life. So, like, at the moment, I'm in the wrong sort of split of training to be sort of aiming for the times that you'd like to see yourself are achieving.
So I guess you're right in that the wattages, you have to be able to apply a good amount of force to get the flywheel down to like 110 splits. There's no doubt about that. And so talking about wattages and it going up exponentially, not sure what Phil's current, what the wattage is for his average wattage for his current world record is. But so my PB in the 500 is 112.7, and Phil's old world record was 110.5. And I remember doing that, looking at it and thinking, I think I've just broken 900 watts at 112.7. And to think just 2 splits faster at 110.5 is 1,000 watts. So it seems like, you've only got to improve a couple of seconds. That should be easy. Well, actually, no, I need to improve like 11% to get those 2 seconds. It's not like that's not a small gap between 112 and 110. It's like 11%. So it's unless you look at the numbers like that and see the exponential graphs like you obviously have done, it's hard to appreciate the difference. So again, if Phil's new world record is probably,
I think he broke 1,100 watts. You know.
Right. Well, exactly.
I'm sure I remember seeing something that I'm sure he broke at like 1,100 watts, which
it's hard to explain how much of a phenomenal athletic performance that is. Yeah.
Like, it is the difference, isn't it, between obviously me being in 10th at the British Indoor Championships and I think you came 3rd and Phil came 1st.
Yeah.
And like that difference is the likes of being able to squat 203 kilos. Whereas if I was to try and train that way now and then also play football twice a week, I'm going to be in all sorts of pain and injuries. It's just not really conducive to everything that I've got going on at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, the rowing is a very linear movement, isn't it? There's no doubt about that. If you only squat in that plane and only train in that plane, then you'll probably have some difficulties on the football pitch. And if anyone comes at you from an angle that's not straightforward,
major issues. Not only that as well, it's like things like pulling muscles. Obviously, if I'm going to fatigue my legs that much during the week and then go for a sprint down the line, I used to actually have a lot of hamstring injuries back in the day because when I was a bit younger, I would train legs once or twice a week. But again, it was finding when the right time was. And then I was doing almost too much leg training for the amount of like football I was playing. So it would be a case of me pushing a ball down the line and ping, there goes a hamstring, out for a couple of weeks. So in my later life, my older life, I've been a bit more smart around leg training. But if I am entering these like rowing events, then I just got to know that there's obviously the likes of yourself that this is your sort of thing, that this is what you train towards, whereas I've got other priorities as well to think about.
So I guess I've been training 70% rowing and sort of 30% weightlifting. I'm having a bit of fun with weightlifting, really. I'm never going to be good at weightlifting. I don't have the mobility now, but it's just been a bit of fun. And joining in the Guildford weightlifting guys, we've got a good team. So I've been getting involved in a few weightlifting competitions in the last year, which is again, there's some absolutely phenomenal athletes in weightlifting that you look at them and think, like, blimey, I can never be up there with the leagues of these guys. Their strength is, my strength is okay for rowing, but for weightlifting, it's just poor.
It's another level again, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I think once I've stopped playing football, it'll be something that I'll be able to focus on a lot more. I just don't know when I'm going to be able to hang my boots up, essentially. Another issue that I do have as well is I've actually got a torn ACL and a torn meniscus. So I have to think about that when doing things like squats and things like that, because I've not had it operated on. I went through rehab for it.
Right. And on the football pitch, that doesn't cause you too many problems or anything?
Well, I had... So the year before last, I took a year off playing football and literally just focused on strengthening my legs up and maintaining some sort of mobility with that. And then last season, I sort of helped out every now and again, played where I was needed, played a bit more towards the back end of the season, and then I just got bored of watching, so I thought, I'm just going to play it again. I've had no issues since. The only times I really seem to have issues, touch wood, are really random situations. Like it'll literally like be getting out of the car and it'll just open up a little bit and click, and then yeah, it's not like a pain or anything. I just notice it. You know, like where you say if you were to pull your finger out to crack your knuckle, it's that sort of feeling, and it just dislodges a little bit. Or it'd be a case of like the other day, I was literally taking my boxers off to get in the shower, and it just dislodged a little bit and was uncomfortable. But I think with me playing football, I know like I'm more ready for it. I'm ready for the change of direction. I'm ready for potential impact. So I think that helps. Whereas doing random mundane tasks, then I'm not really thinking about my knee as much.
I think with injuries like that, isn't it often the case that when your foot is planted on the floor, you're a lot more stable in it. It's like when you take your foot off the floor. So I imagine that when you were taking your boxes off, your leg was at like an inward angle, and the weight of the knee was kind of
literally, just like flicked my foot or something, and just put my foot down, and then But fingers crossed, I'll be all right for the season. I've played a fair bit of football recently and not had a problem. So hoping I can get through a whole season. But so just going back to some of your other rowing achievements, I had a quick look through your Instagram. You at one point had the 1 minute world record for the slide of 432 meters, and also a 100-meter world record on the slide at 12.5.
Yeah, so I think both of those have been taken since.
Right.
Yeah, I might have to double check those. I'm pretty sure that the 100 has gone. Well, anyway, the minute's been broken. Not on slides now. Did Nick Thomas do? Maybe Phil did 4:35 or something. So at the time when I did that minute, it was the fastest minute that'd been done, but it was on slides. But Phil had done like 4:30. So that was my target that day, was just to break that, but knowing that it was on slides.
So is it easier to go harder on slides?
Yes. So slides for sprinting, you can rate higher on slides because you drive, and then once you lose tension in the drive, it sort of springs back underneath you, and you can basically drive again. So I can rate much higher on the slides. So I can maybe get more out of it than most other people as well that are already rating 50.
Yeah. You can go up to like 30.
Yeah. Half of my battle on with a longer drive is returning to the catch, whereas with the slides, the bungee on the bottom of the slide just pulls the slide back underneath you, and then you can just drive again, big leg drive. So yeah, the 100 I did was 12.5, and so that on the slides, I think it was either 3 or 4 consecutive pulls, sub 1 minute split on that to achieve that. I think the average was like 102 in the end.
Wow.
Obviously, in any starting pull, you have the first couple of strokes in 100 meters that are like 132, 117, or whatever it goes to, and you lose a lot of your average on those first strokes.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's like 3 or 4 strokes that were sub 1 minute on that 100 meter effort.
Bloody hell. Have you not done a 500 meter then on the slides?
I haven't got the kahunas to attempt. But the minute nearly killed me off, because for me, a 500 meters is about 50 strokes. Let's say I rate 40 strokes a minute for 1.25 minutes, so it was about 50 strokes. On the slides, the minute was just, I think, 52 strokes or 54 strokes or something. So the minute was more strokes for me at max effort than my 500 meter off slides.
So you're asking for another sort of 15 strokes on top of that?
And I just don't think I don't think I could exert another few strokes. And
fair enough.
I never attempted it. I wish I had done, because I wish I had have tried to have gone faster than Phil's earlier world record of 1:10.5, so that I could have said at one point, I've done the fastest ever 500. But I don't think I could go faster than Phil's current world record, or whatever it is, 1:09. I don't think I can go faster than that.
You never know. If you were at like 1:02 for a minute, you only need another 10 seconds. You can't really do that much damage to a 1:02, surely.
Oh no, so that the 4:32 was like an average of 1:09 for a minute.
Oh right, okay.
It was the 100 meters that was...
the 100 meters. Okay.
Yeah,
it's
probably not quite capable. My best rowing days, again, when I was working from home, I had a little bit more time, get those more lunchtime power efforts in. Now it's more about, I think this year, if I can get close to 114 flat in the 500 would be good. Basically, a second on last year, I think, is doable. That'd be the aim.
Yeah. I think I wrote down, so you got a 1:15.5 last year. So 1.5 seconds, I'm sure, with a bit of a power tugging training, you can get yourself to a 1:14.
Yeah, so I did 1:15.5 at Brick. I did 1:15.1, I think it was, at the Worlds.
All right.
So even then, without a race start, I think that would have been like 1:14.5, and then yeah, in my head, I think I'd like to do 1:14 without the race start. Maybe dip slightly under 1:14 this year because I've put in a bit more preparation towards it. I'm a bit heavier, stronger than I was last year. So yeah, I think it's doable. But
Definitely
whether I
doable.
get 1:12.7 again, don't know. That would take a lifestyle change.
Asking for a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like we said, the power curve being exponential, the lower you go, and yeah, it's sort of bordering on nearly 1,000 watts at that point, isn't it? Like I think you said it was about 900.
900, I think. I think it was for the 112.7. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was one of those ones where I put in a real good preparation for the Worlds that year, and I think that was my qualification piece for the Worlds during lockdown. It was 22. I did that one when it went virtual again, and then I got COVID in between doing that one and the actual Worlds, and I think did like 1:14.1 at the Worlds. So yeah,
Jeez.
didn't
Some big
quite.
times. So with obviously you're doing a lot of heavy lifting, you're putting big power down on the ergs. As you're getting older, now at I think 36, how are you feeling the effects of sort of the training and the recovery? Is it getting harder or are you still managing?
I think I'm still managing at the moment, touching wood. Um, it's now it's just coming down to much more of a case of prioritising time and rest and work. It's probably the work side that is different to when I had much more of the luxury of time a few years ago. I think if I was in the same position work-wise and I could train more and rest more, probably I'd still be capable of getting towards my peak. But I think the reality of the life situation at the moment is work stresses, life stresses. Probably, I think I'm realistic about my capability at the moment of being about like the 1:14 level. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, like I know similar, obviously, as I've progressed through the corporate ladder a little bit, things get busier, you end up working late a little bit now and again, your training maybe slides a little bit, and yeah, it can be a little bit difficult. But with that all being said then, so what are obviously you're aiming for the 1:14, what are your near and maybe a little bit further training goals for the future?
Well, this is an interesting one because they've obviously just announced that the Worlds is going to go virtual again for 2025, which has caused a bit of a kerfuffle between people because the indoor rowing communities, it's quite a good online community that everyone knows each other, but everyone also thrives on those in-person competitions
Yeah.
where if you turn up in person, you know that person there is saying, I'm here, I'm competing in front of you, this is a legitimate performance, I'm happy to be drug tested by the drug testers. That's what sport is about. Whereas the virtual side is all a bit someone in their garage and, never quite got on with the virtual side. But having said that, I think that this year is slightly different. I think World Rowing have taken a bit of a strategic change in direction because of next year's Olympic esports.
It's the first I've heard of this.
So in Saudi Arabia at the end of 2025 or third quarter 25 is the Olympic esports. And World Rowing recently have partnered with, I don't know, is it XR, virtual reality rowing?
All right.
And I think they're going to use the World Virtual Rowing, and what they've also introduced is going to be a series of virtual races next year as a qualification period for
That'd be pretty cool.
esports.
Well, yeah.
So,
Sounds pretty cool though, because like when I was looking for just before I signed up for the indoor rowing championships, I was looking for other sort of indoor events, and there's barely any that you can actually go to,
Yeah,
which I was pretty surprised about. I think that was literally the only one of the year that I could find, and then there was a couple of like you say, random virtual events where I don't have a rowing machine, so I'd literally have to be in a gym with my laptop linking it up to a
yeah.
PM5 monitor.
So in 2021, I think it was, I was on the rowing machine, ready for the World Virtual Rowing Champs, whatever it was, and then my internet went down and I got booted out of the race.
No.
So
Oh, that's an absolute nightmare.
I wasn't present in that final, and then I like used that anger and aggression and did a 500 that day, and did a PB at the time, but it just didn't count, and it would have come third or whatever in the world record.
Oh,
But
jeez.
the virtual stuff, I've had a negative thing against it since then.
I
Um,
can only imagine.
but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it does develop, because there must be a reason why they've decided to go virtual when all the athletes, like, there's not been a positive response from athletes saying, yeah, that's great, I really look forward to this virtual racing. I think they've done it because of their strategic direction towards Olympic e-sport
Money
integration.
talks, doesn't it? Especially if it's coming
Yeah.
from Saudi as well. There's a lot
Saudi
of money over
Arabia,
there these days.
the IOC have got plenty of money. It's sort of spilling over the edge of their bank account into the ones next to it. So hopefully they're going to spend it on some esports.
Yeah. So is that something that you'd be going for?
I'd love to give it a go. It's a ridiculous
Why
concept to
not?
think that the IOC are putting the name to computer games. I think it's ludicrous from that front when the Olympics is about core sport, athletics, swimming, cycling, But if, yeah, it could be a fun thing to be a part of. So that's a long way off. There's a lot of work to do. Um, but I've got that in the back of my mind. I want to be involved in things like this virtual worlds if that's part of this pathway towards
Yeah.
this theoretical Olympic esports inclusion.
Right, it sounds interesting. I'm definitely going to have a little look into that after this because it's the first I've heard of it. I think the rowing community is a very sort of, if you're not a part of it, it's a pretty secluded community of people. And I'm just sort of teetering on the edge of getting back involved.
There was a press release, I think, a couple of days ago from World Rowing, and it was mainly
Okay.
about saying it would be virtual, but it did sort of mention this uh, the series of rowing competitions they're going to have next year and the virtual worlds as part of qualification towards the Olympic esports. Well, they didn't guarantee that it was going to be included because who knows what computer
Yeah.
games or events are going to be included. But yeah, it should be interesting.
Probably have a World FIFA tournament or something like that.
Probably is. It's a well played game, isn't it? So
Yeah, exactly. I've never really been into playing games, to be honest.
I've
So
never
yeah,
done well since Nintendo 64 many years ago.
it's funny I actually say that. I've got on my desk right in front of me a Game Boy Color with Pokemon Pinball in, which every now and again gets played if I'm on a bit of a boring meeting.
Just on your downtime, bit of Pokemon pinball.
Yeah, just a classic one. Not really played anything since. But so to round this up then, just going back to the 500-meter world record, do you reckon that'll be beat anytime soon, or do you reckon that's going to be stood for quite a while? Because Phil seems to be a little bit far ahead of everyone else at the moment.
I cannot see it being beaten anytime soon, especially not by a clean athlete. And I say that because I'm 100% sure that Big Phil is a clean athlete,
Yeah.
which is why it's such an incredible performance, because there were so many people that use the rowing machine that aren't, and so many people that are doing your Hyrox of the world, so many people that could try and break that record that aren't, and I believe that Phil is a clean athlete. And I cannot see it being beaten anytime soon, unless there's some sort of 6'10" ridiculous non-clean athlete that tries to give it a go. Yeah, I think it's one of the most impressive sporting performances for a long time. Phil's recent
Yeah. Well, when I saw it, I was like, I was genuinely blown away by that. Seeing the time was ridiculous. I think he beat his own time by like a second and a half or something insane.
Yeah, I literally can't remember what it is. Maybe it was 109.6 or something. It might be 109.6.
Yeah,
Maybe it went 109 flat. I can't remember now. But yeah, it's an astonishing performance.
Just like you mentioned at the show, I said I was going to round that up, but you mentioned about unclean athletes, essentially. What is your thoughts on this enhanced games that's meant to be happening next year?
I don't think it'll get off the ground because I don't think the enhanced athletes will beat a lot of the top clean athletes, if that makes sense. I
Right.
think the enhanced athletes I think they're the sort of people either at the end of their career who've had clean careers who want to try and hang on to it, but they're past it and they're not going to quite be as good
Yeah.
as they used to be, even with the sort of drugs. Or it's going to be athletes who wanted to cut corners and just haven't put in the work in the first place, even if they were taking a shitload of drugs. I guess the exception is maybe weightlifting.
Yeah.
In a core strength sport like that, if you just fed some super heavies shitload of drugs, then maybe you're going to get some outlier performances like that, because that's going to affect the sport like that most. But in a lot of other sports, I don't know, I just can't see it. I think it'd be embarrassing for the enhanced games if you have swimmers competing, not breaking world records, and then I think it'll fizzle out pretty quickly. Yeah.
Well, that's what I would find really interesting, if times and weights and distances and things like that weren't necessarily improved on, because then it would potentially spark the question as to whether actual Olympians were taking stuff and just not getting caught.
I think you've got to bear in mind, though, that a lot of the top Olympians have the support network of like their governing body behind them, and the sports science guys behind them, and they've got optimized lives. Whereas the enhanced games people are not going to have that. They're going to be have-a-go heroes, experimenting with drugs that they don't know don't know how it's going to respond in their system.
Well, I read somewhere that the organizer wasn't going to be asking athletes to join until after this Olympics, because basically, I think he's on about asking the Olympians that were just at the Paris Olympics, but he didn't want to ask them before it in case it made them not be able to compete essentially at the Paris Olympics. So I think his idea is to get actual Olympians and then get scientists and specialists with sports performance enhancing drugs to then give these athletes the best chance at breaking records. That's how I read into it, which for me as like a spectator, like I'm a cleaner. I'm not even an athlete, but I've always been clean and always will be. For me as like a spectator, I would find it so interesting to watch. Maybe as a one-off, like I don't think I'd want to see it all the time, but to just see what the human body was genuinely capable of doing.
This is what strongman is. It's like strongman is just a totally untested sport,
Yeah.
and it's great to
Yeah.
watch. Because strongman started as a circus event, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
that I agree with you. I would love to see someone given the maximum amount of drugs and see how fast they could run 100 meters. It'd be a great spectacle.
Yeah, like an 8.5 second 100 meters.
It'd be a great spectacle from that point of view. But I can't see it being the same levels of participation, competitiveness, which drive up performance, and the support behind it. So I think it'll be a bit of a flop, and I think it will taint anyone's careers that goes and does that, and then
Yeah.
they'll be like, "Well, were you taking drugs when you were competing? Well, if you're susceptible to taking drugs, were you taking drugs when you were in the actual Olympics?" So
Yeah, it's true. I think the only way it flies is money. I think that's the only way. If there's enough money thrown at it, then maybe it takes off. But
I think there's been one Australian swimmer who said he's been a bit of the voice for it, saying, "Yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to break some records and stuff." But, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think we'll round this one up. Thank you very much for coming on. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it was good chat. We've covered a lot of subjects, and
Definitely, yeah.
So
yeah, maybe we need another podcast just to solve some problems. But where can everyone find you, Chris, if they want to keep up with your power tugging and weightlifting?
The power tugging. I guess my Instagram is it's more a training diary, really. Like, people can look at it, people can not look at it. It's up to them. But it's at Chris Scott 6300, which was my discus personal best, 63 meters. Chris Scott 6300. Feel free to have a look and see some of my erg screens.
Yeah. Well, I'll put the link down in the description below, so if anyone wants to go check that out. But Chris, thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me on. Good to chat to you. All right,
No
take
problem.
care.
If everyone's enjoyed that episode, drop a like. If you're new, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.